This may be controversial among some religious people, but I swear Jesus meditated. I could not be a safe space for anyone until I was a safe space for me.
Donald Trump.
He's not a good speaker.
Welcome to It Is Good, hosted by Mike McLain, where we pause to find gratitude in everyday moments and celebrate the beauty in life. From sunrises to heartfelt conversations, let's shift focus to what is truly good.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to It Is Good, the show with good questions and even greater purpose. Today, we have someone who is truly changing the way leaders communicate, John Bates. John has worked with over 12,000 clients, including astronauts from NASA, hence the polo that he's wearing, executives at Johnson & Johnson, and elite teams from the U.S. Navy EOD. But John's story goes far beyond just coaching top executives. He's built and lost an $80 million company. He's spoken to audiences as large as 700,000 people, which is a great story. And he's the author of Your Amazing Itty Bitty Guide to Being TED-Worthy, a book that blends science with communication to teach leaders how to inspire and influence with every word they say. Through his approach, his clients have raised millions in venture capital, won pitch competitions, and changed industries for the better. John Bates, thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely my pleasure, Mike.
Well, I'm excited to dive in, and there's so many topics that, from a selfish standpoint, I'm excited to learn from you. So with that, let's hop right into the first question. So you've worked with high pressure teams like NASA, the U.S. Navy EOD, and I've spent some time with the EOD side. These are really high quality, very sharp individuals. In your experience, are there any common threads, communication skills or otherwise, that are effective across all industries? Or do these needs kind of change drastically depending on the sector?
Well, I mean, it's almost like, and we didn't, but it's almost like you set me up with that question, because really fundamentally what my training is about, Mike, through a really happy set of circumstances I can tell you about later, but purely by accident, I decided to base all of my training as much as I could in human evolutionary biology and human neurophysiology, so I could show people not only what works, but also why it works based in science. And that just opened doors to places like EOD and NASA and Johnson & Johnson. And so fundamentally, from my perspective, there are very important, basic, fundamental principles that are absolutely the same across cultures, across countries, across, male, female, high status, low status, this, that, the other thing. If you're talking with human beings, these things matter.
So I know the audience right now is like, wait, is John going to give us the keys to the kingdom here? Would you be willing, for the audience's pleasure, to just share what is one of those, perhaps just one of those that you enjoy talking about?
Sure. I mean, and one of them that I think is it's great to talk about, and it's maybe kind of obvious in hindsight, and it has a particular impact on your public speaking, but it has an impact on your whole life. And that is the saying, you have to believe it. If you don't, they won't. Now, that is not news to anyone listening, right? But it's true, right? That's why they teach it to you in sales and in whatever. You have to believe it. If you don't, they won't. But what we don't talk about enough is the neurobiology underneath that. And the neurobiology underneath that is explained by mirror neurons. Mike, if we were talking about cooking instead of public speaking and leadership, and I had a big old bunch of purple carrots, and I had a big old butcher knife, and I was chopping up the purple carrots and telling you about the... Okay, now what I want you to notice is that I don't have purple carrots. I don't have a big old butcher knife, but I'm going to bet I saw you jumped because you have mirror neurons, right? When I pretended to cut my finger. And that's because mirror neurons are always on. They're always working. And here's the big breakthrough realization for me that someone taught me that I want to pass on. Here's the big breakthrough. They're always mirroring you. They are always mirroring you, right? When you walk in the room and everybody turns to look at you, they're mirroring you. When you raise your hand in a meeting, say something, they're mirroring you. And when you're at the top of the hierarchy, they're always mirroring you, right? And I want you to think of someone you know. Don't blurt it out, Mike, but think of someone you know. Picture them who is grumpy, right? You know at least one person who's grumpy.
Sure.
Now, imagine what happens when they walk in the room, right? They walk in, they're all grumpy. We all get grumpy immediately,
Yes.
right? Everybody.
Yes.
And then they grump around for a while and everybody's grumpy and then they leave. And the minute they leave, we're all fine again. But everywhere they go, they think everyone's grumpy. Mirror neurons.
You know, this is such a timely topic, John. A good friend of mine, Ben Garland, and I spent 4 days in Scottsdale and just dove into this stuff in the deepest way. And this is nowhere on our script, but how would you advise somebody to kind of step into that with intentionality? How do you cultivate that mindset that has an effect with the neurons in your mind?
Okay, so I want to say first, the reason to do that is because I swear to you, this is Jedi mind powers, right? Really understanding and taking on mirror neurons is how he did that when he said, these are not the droids you're looking for. Oh, these aren't the droids we're looking for. You can move along now. You can move along now, right? That was mirror neurons. And so let's think of it, because it applies everywhere, but let's think of it for speakers, okay? Because it's real obvious with speakers. I used to have bad audiences once in a while. And I got to imagine, Mike, you maybe have had a bad audience before, right?
Indeed.
Okay, so when I learned this and I really took it on, I can tell you confidently, without even exaggerating a little bit, I have never had a bad audience since then.
Wow.
Ever. And here's why. Because I've gotten up on stages and thought for a second, ooh, at some point, oh, maybe this is a bad audience, right? But the minute that thought goes through my head, the question I've trained myself to ask now is not like, how do I get out of here sooner? I ask myself, what can I do to give them something better to mirror? Right? So I turn up the dial a little bit, or I do something, anything that's going to give them something even better to mirror, right? And I just never give up. And I will never let the audience pull me down ever again. I just constantly do whatever I need to do. Turn it up a little more, do this, do that, whatever, to bring them up and make them mirror something good versus letting them make me mirror them down. Make sense?
That almost seems and sounds so overwhelming. You're one individual, and and we'll get to this in a second here, which is a remarkable video. But when you speak to a room of 700,000 people, you're carrying the weight of almost elevating their energy, their mindset. How do you take that on as a single individual?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is a really heavy mental, emotional, even spiritual lift. And the first step to taking that on is just being willing to, right? Like there's this great levels of human consciousness map that I have printed out and put on my wall. And I didn't realize, and I really think they nailed it, And one of the higher levels of human consciousness is just willingness. That's actually a level of consciousness, to be willing. And that is the first step. And then it's just, does my message matter enough to me to do that? Does this audience matter enough to me to do that?
Yeah.
And listen, I know what you talk about here, Mike. Like, I think you could go as deep as to say, do I have the love it's going to take to be willing to do that?
Wow.
Right?
So one of the things that we talk about all the time is just the large majority of society is walking through life in kind of a reactionary mindset. Oh, this thing's bad,
Yeah.
I'm sad. This thing's good,
Yeah.
I'm happy. But breaking people free of that kind of reactive nature, what advice would you give people to just find themselves in that cycle of reaction?
Ooh, that's a really good question because look, I find myself in that reaction and I like to think that I have done a ton of work, and I still find myself in that cycle of reaction. And then I notice, right?
Mm.
And I do think that one of the big things that makes a huge difference for people is meditating, you know? And I'll tell you what, this may be controversial among some religious people, but I swear Jesus meditated. Like, how could he not have? You know what I mean? And so I really think that a lot of these really great spiritual avatars meditated, and meditating is not what many people think it is, right? It's pretty much impossible as a human being to sit there for 3 minutes with your eyes closed and not have a thought. That's not the point. The point is, the minute you have a thought, or the minute you notice you have a thought, to let it go, right? And really, meditation on some level is a practice of being with your mind and noticing it.
Mm.
Because we all think we're our minds. And, one of the
Yep.
big things that I teach people around this stuff, Mike, is I do an exercise called creating yourself and creating your audience. And maybe we won't go through the whole thing, but I'd love to do the first part with you.
Please,
Okay.
by all means. Sounds great.
Okay. So the first part is where I introduce the audience, and some of them already know this, but I reintroduce them I introduce the audience to what I call your monkey mind.
Hmm.
Okay. And that's what the Buddhists call it. And there are a lot of other names for it and stuff, but let's just meet your monkey mind. Okay, Mike? So we're going to just look at me and just be with me for a minute. We're going to meet your monkey mind and
Okay.
anyone who's listening in my monkey mind. Okay. So here we go. Ready?
Yeah, ready.
Okay, here we go. Monkey mind? Maybe he has a monkey mind. I don't have a monkey mind. Where did Mike find this guy? Does it say find something you love and roll in it? Is that what it says? Who is this guy? Right? So did you hear that voice?
I'm very present with you right now, John. So I'm just absorbing your interactions, your smile, the energy that you're putting off. So no, I find it hilarious, but I 100% recognize that the majority of people, that's exactly what's going on. 100%.
Right. So that voice that often sounds like, that voice is your monkey mind. And I think of it like your crazy roommate. It comes free in the box with every human being. You can't really get rid of it. You can often turn it way down, right? And being present is the best way to do that. And I think of it like my scared inner child, right? It's just trying to protect me, right? It's like, don't get noticed, don't stand up, don't do anything that stands out, don't trust them, you're not good enough, maybe you shouldn't do it, like, oh, just sit down and shut up, right? Okay, so here's the biggest distinction, I think, to really step into a new level of consciousness is to recognize that voice in your head is not you. You are actually the big silent presence that's listening to that voice.
Yeah.
And you have a choice. And it becomes really interesting, and it can almost become funny when you meditate, right? When you start bringing yourself to this noticing your mind, like it can almost get funny,
Yeah.
Like, in fact, I'm pretty sure, go look at like a bunch of comedians that are super popular. The way they got so popular is they just put their monkey mind on loudspeaker, and it's freaking hilarious, right?
Yeah. 100%.
But that is not you, and you don't have to listen to that voice, right? Like if I listened to that voice, like I would have just disconnected from the call when you read my intro, right? Like I'm not that guy. Like I'm not, what if they find out I'm a fraud? Well, it's like, no, that's my crazy roommate. Like I don't listen to that anymore. I pat it on the head. I say, thank you. I got this.
Yeah. And I think there's levels to this game, John. So I think a lot of people, even like a reactionary state, they'll start working out, they'll start reading books. They're like, oh, I respect myself more, but they're still reacting to the stimulus versus actually recognizing, oh, this is still what's actually behind the curtain, so to speak. I still am in control of what this mind is thinking, or it's its own separate entity. And I think when people get to that point, which for those that have been following me for any length of time, they know that was part of my own personal journey, is realizing that, man, this guy was pretty negative 2 years ago. And now, what's that one movie with it's a cartoon. It's the guy that like breaks the buildings, and then there's a small little repair guy that comes in and fixes stuff.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Fix It
But
Rob. Fix It Rob.
okay. Yes, I
Yeah.
remember. Yeah.
That's my mind. Fix It Rob. He's like, oh, that's broken. I'm gonna go fix that. And then he just jumps straight in, just immediately without even thinking. And there's an evolution, I think, that occurs, and when you start paying attention to it. I've personally seen my own thoughts evolve and become more positive and uplifting and encouraging, a little bit kinder to myself. Have you seen that in your own journey? Have you seen that with the clients that you mentor?
Yes. And you know what, Mike, you just pushed a button, and I can't help but like tell you this story.
Please.
Okay. Because I think this goes right to what you were saying, and it's so huge. So you said, I even founded a company that raised over $80 million, right? With 3 other guys. It was the 4 of us. And then we went out of business in the .com crash. And it still kind of makes me sick to my stomach to think about that, but so it goes, right? And I went into a corner, and I did not have the sophistication to say, okay, well, that was a pretty good ride. Let's go try it again. I was so devastated and so embarrassed and so ashamed and all that stuff that I just went in a corner and cried about it. And I had a coach who realized where I was in one of our conversations. She was like, oh, John, and because like I was waking up in the middle of the night, Mike, and if I stuck my tongue out, it would look like Play-Doh that had been jammed up against my teeth with a hydraulic press, like I was so stressed, and I was so beating myself up, and I was thinking I was never going to be okay again. And I'm just a super duper loser. And she said, John, when you go down that tunnel of beating yourself up, thinking you're not good enough, thinking you're never going to be okay, all that stuff, when you go down that tunnel, there is no light at the end of that tunnel.
Mm.
There's nothing worth going in there for at all. So I want you to promise me something. And I said, okay. She said, promise me that when you notice you're in that tunnel, whether it's been an hour, a day, a week, a month, doesn't matter. The minute you notice, I want you to promise me that you'll back out. And I said, okay, I promise. And she said, here's what I want you to do instead, John. I want you to live in the listening of the people who love you.
Mm.
Because who you are is not who you think you are. Who you are is who they think you are, because that's how you actually show up in the world. Dude, I started to cry like a baby, right? And I sat there for a while and, cried it out. And then I took it on. And it was unbelievable what happened. Just like in some ways I could say that was the moment in my life where I went from being genuinely unsuccessful to being successful. And I just didn't realize it yet. Right. And as I sat with that and as I practiced that, I realized something that helped me a lot, which was that I could not be a safe space for anyone until I was a safe space for me.
Yes.
And that's not so easy, right? But on those days when I couldn't do it for myself, I could do it for that. Make sense?
100%. And, just in an effort to be fully transparent, I'm actually going through a pretty difficult season right now. And for me personally, that has been a really great aid to help me lift up out of, what otherwise might be kind of some negative, self-talk and various things. But I think that's, as we said earlier, there are layers to that. And so if you reach out and you say, hey, what is your perception of who I am? There's another layer even above that. And that's this really philosophical question that I think everybody tries to get at is, who are you? So if you would just kind of toying with answering this question, you go beyond people's view of you, you go beyond the view of yourself. How do you help people find who you are?
Okay, this is a great question. And I got to tell you, my answer might sound off-putting at first, because for a long time, there was this quote that I was turned on to a while back. And at first it sounded really arrogant to me, and I really resisted it. And then after having some of these insights and breakthroughs, I heard it again and it sounded completely different to me. It didn't sound arrogant anymore. It sounded like a possibility. And here's the saying: life is not about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself.
I mean, this is really, really deep-seated, heavy stuff.
It's real. It's real life. Like, this is what we're here for. This is the journey, man. It's not about buying Doritos and watching the Super Bowl. That's fun and everything, right? But this is the stuff we're here to do, I think.
No, John, I'm in complete agreement with you. And so there's probably a tie-in here. And so the generic question that everyone wants to know, especially when it comes to like public speaking, so many people struggle with the fear of getting in front of 10, 100, 1,000 people. You did it in front of 700,000. So, what is the tie-in between self, public speaking, and what advice would you give somebody that's just struggling with that, that's kind of like setting the baseline for getting over that initial fear?
Okay, this is a great question. And dude, I have such a good answer. And I'm going to give it to you backwards from what I usually do, because I want to start, given where we are in our conversation, I want to start with the real deep meat of this, which came to me from a woman, that same woman who I think saved my life with that coaching of live in the listening with the people who love you, of the people who love you. Her name is Candace Shivers Morgan.
Which, by the way,
She
shout out to you coaches that care and give selflessly to help others. That to me is a home run. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you 100%, brother. So she also told me, she said, John, if you get up on stage and you have your attention on yourself, then you have your attention on a minor ball of petty concerns that's of no real interest to anyone but you. Ouch, right? She said, if, however, you get up on stage and you have your attention on the audience and you have your attention on the message and the difference that you're there to make and the difference that those people are going to make for the people in their lives because of your message, now you have your attention on something worth thinking about, right? So when I'm coaching people around this, I say, so the short coaching is stop being so narcissistic, right? But really, when you have your attention on yourself, you feel nervous, right? And when you go out, think about mirror neurons. You got your attention on yourself and you're nervous, and you walk out in front of the audience and immediately they mirror you. They have their attention on themselves and they're nervous.
I mean, I noticed that even beyond public speaking, just being in a room with people, it recycles itself. And even the people that, there's a term that gets thrown out quite a bit, frequency, and that really turns a lot of people off. But having those conversations with people that are kind of at that same level, it's like there's no barriers or impediments to conversation versus somebody that's like way higher or way lower. There's almost this little bit of friction in the conversation. It just feels a little bit off, a little clunky.
Exactly.
So how do you, sorry, quick question, John. How do you help them to focus outside of themselves? Like, it's one thing to say, okay, focus your thought, think about these things that are outside of you focused. Are there any exercises or things that you recommend to people?
Yes, and it's super easy, and it starts with something that all of us have done. You don't stop there. So here's how it starts. You notice you're nervous. Have you ever noticed you're nervous before?
100%, yes.
Yeah, right. Me too. Right. So now the thing to work on is it's sort of like meditation, right? Now that you've noticed, what do you do about it? Okay. So the first step, though, is just notice. But then the minute you notice you're nervous, what I do, because I've been trained and I've trained myself in this for a long time, I notice I'm nervous and I go, oh, that's about me. This is not about me. And I put my attention wherever I am. I'm in the car thinking about the thing I have to do next week with this huge, private equity firm or whatever, right? And I'm like, oh, that's about me. And I picture them, even if I don't know what they look like. I picture them and the difference I want to make for them. And I picture them in their lives and actually being able to say something that's going to go beyond them, right? And all of a sudden, what I was feeling changes a little bit. Physiologically, it's the same. But now, instead of being focused on me and nervous, I'm focused on them, and I call that feeling that I still have a little bit of excitement. So I go from being nervous and focused on me to being excited and focused on them. And the first step is notice you're nervous. And then just get your attention over there. Wherever you are, whatever you're in the middle of, you're making dinner or whatever, you're in the shower and you notice you're nervous about that upcoming thing, practice from the beginning. Don't wait till you get to the stage.
Yeah.
Before you get there, every time you notice, put your attention on the audience. Make it a habit, right? And then here's something that helps. Artists are artists for a reason. And here is the same advice that Candace gave me, but said a little differently by none other, I'm not kidding, none other than Snoop Doggy Dogg. Here we go. Don't be nervous, be at their service. And that's my former service dog, Flash, who helped me recover from that autoimmune disease that almost killed me after I lost my $80 million .com company. So that's the joke. It says, don't be nervous, be at their service, and there's a service dog.
Yeah.
And none other than Snoop Doggy Dogg. That's the quote.
That's amazing. So I've got a little bit of an anecdote here, and it's a little bit off track, but then I'll pop over to the video here in a second. But so okay. I don't know if you know this about me, John. I'm 6'8". So when I'm in a crowd,
I mean, I knew you were big. I don't know if I knew you were that tall.
So an interesting thing occurs when you're over, let's say 6'6". You get in a crowd, you make direct eye contact with somebody. You're like, oh, we've got this like really special elite club that we're in. But what I've noticed is that as I started to get outside of myself and was more present with individuals one-on-one or even in a room with a lot of different people, it's the same acknowledgement. I can see and feel when someone is not just focused on themselves and internal, but they're actually available. Like I can feel the availability from them. It's the same.
So well said. So well said.
So to everybody that's listening, what John just gave is, from my personal journey, probably the biggest nugget is if you can get outside of yourself. And what I hear you saying, John, just to paraphrase, tell me if I'm wrong, is once you get this, public speaking is a one-off and you're going to be fine. But this is a programmatic, lifelong lesson that really helps you to evolve.
100%. And and Mike, I want to be really careful because like I don't like I mean, in a way it's true. I'll go in to the grocery store and I'll walk around and it kind of seems to me like everybody's asleep. And then there'll be that one person and I'll make eye contact with us. Like we're both 6'8" looking above the crowd and we'll just both know. And whether we even talk or anything, it's like there's this knowing, right? And it sounds like there's something elitist or I'm better than you or whatever. That's not at all what I mean. It's just, there's just another level of being aware and present. And when you find it, yes, you want everybody to have it, And look, am I always in that place? No, man, I'm a human. Right.
Yeah.
But I'm in that place way more than I used to be, and it's amazing to go out into the world and every once in a while just bing, there's that other person that's 6'8" and you're like, whoa, right?
Yeah.
That's such a good metaphor.
Have you seen The Matrix? I mean, that's another metaphor right there.
Yeah, totally.
Kind of like that as well, but
yes.
when you start getting nerdy and sci-fi-ish, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, John, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to play a short clip here. And we've already talked about what this is. I just want to kind of get your thoughts, reactions, and if you'd be willing to share what was going on in your mind and your heart as this was occurring. So I'm going to share this here.
Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj ki. He knew the path of good, the path of wealth, and the path of fulfillment and happiness lies in honoring and empowering women. He was very protective of women, and we owe it to his legacy to protect and honor women. If you agree with me to honor his legacy and protect and empower women, let me hear from you. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj ki.
Amazing.
Wow. Dude, it brings back memories, that's for sure.
Amazing. So what was going on in your head and your heart? That's a remarkable scene.
Well, so that was in India a few years ago. That was me speaking at this ashram, and there were 750,000 people in that ashram spilling out into the city, watching and listening on speakers and TVs and everything. So like I was very conscious of the fact that there were 750,000 human beings that I was addressing, right? And of course I couldn't see them all, right? And then, so just to give you the whole inside baseball of this, because I think it's useful to know, right? So normally I would never take my notes up there with me and do kind of something that's so obviously like I'm checking in with my notes, right? But when I got there the day before, they let me know that I had to do that. They're like, we have translated it and it's going to be on the screens and right. and we've translated it to the 3 languages, and right. So they were like, they would have been really upset with me if I didn't take that up there and do it that way. So I was kind of bummed about that, but I was like, well, okay, that's my ego, right? Like they've asked me to do this. They think it's important. I will do it that way. And then the other thing is that I was speaking about empowering women and empowering women's voices, and it was Central India. And I didn't fully realize till I got to the event, like all the men were in the middle and the women were on the edges. And my comments were actually slightly controversial. I did not expect that, right? But it made me even more proud to be there talking about that. And so I had spent, look, there's something, you know how it is, Mike, like when you're on stage in front of 20 people, it's one thing. Then there's maybe another break at 100 people. It's a different thing. And then there's like 250 to 500 people. It's another thing. And then there's like thousands, and that's another thing. And every time that audience gets bigger, it's like there's some matching energetic correspondence that has to happen over here, right? And I was going into this for months knowing it was going to be 750,000 people. And when I stood up on that stage, I mean, and by the way, it was India, and like the stage was chaos, and everybody's talking all these different languages, and there's like 15 people walking around the stage while I'm talking. I'm like, this is not what I expected at all. And but standing up there knowing there's that many people, you can feel the energy. And I definitely felt like my hair was just being blown back by the energy of that audience of just that many people, right? So I was just pretty stoked I could hold it together. And, and then a few other things I did is, I opened with the name of the person that whole event was honoring. And I spent 2 or 3 weeks working on pronouncing that correctly, right? So that anybody from there, like I tried it with 20, 30 people from there till I could say it and they'd be like, oh, perfect, So, and then there were a few other references I made to them and the things that they held dear that I referenced back to my message about honoring women's voices. And I think that was a good thing to do. And then, afterwards, we were supposed to go to a booth and sign autographs, and we almost got trampled getting to the booth. And once we made it to the booth, the police were like, you have to leave now because we can't guarantee your security because people are just so excited. There's too many people. We just can't handle it. So we had to immediately leave. Right. So it was a wild experience. I mean, I know that famous people, that happens a lot. I never had that before.
Yeah. There's got to be a tipping point at some point as well. You were talking about kind of these increments almost, but when you get past 50, 60,000, like, there's some measure. I don't know quite what that is, but it's like at that point, people are just people. Like I can't even fathom talking to that many people.
It was amazing. And I think you're right. And I think that in a way, performing in front of a stadium of 20,000 people in some ways would maybe be harder because you could see them all. But I will say, I could feel them all, So like it was definitely an energetic experience, like one I've never had before. And one of the things that I do, Mike, and I'm running the equations right now, you can kind of see me doing it. What I think about things like this. Me speaking for 3 minutes to 750,000 people, that's whatever number of minutes that is of human life. And let's divide that by 60. So in that 3-minute talk to 750,000 people, I consumed 37,000 500 hours of combined human life. And I wanted to be worthy of that.
That could not be a better segue into the next question. In the digital age where content is rampant and the spectrum of quality is all over the place, how do you or how would you advise people to craft a narrative or tell a story, one, that is something that resonates with people, but two, is worthy of their time and attention?
So, that is basically what I spend my whole life working on with people. And I think that in the time we have, one of the things that I would say, because I think it kind of ties in with the theme of where we've been, is if you have something that happened in your life that you still remember, that meant something really big to you, that is a story that's going to resonate with me because I too am a human being.
Sure. The shared
And so,
experience.
yes. And so you can look through your life and Mike, there are values, and I know that there are values because I hear you talk about them and I see them show up implicitly and explicitly. Where did you learn those values? What's one of your top values, and what's the story about how that came to mean so much to you? Because you know what? That's going to be a really great story. I'm going to want to hear that. So is every other human being.
Yeah. That's really good.
And then thinking about it, right? Like, people are being really generous to listen to you. And I realized at a certain point, I used to think I was the big deal, right? Oh, I'm the podcast guest. I'm the speaker. I thought I was the big deal, admittedly, embarrassingly. Then it dawned on me a while ago, oh, I make absolutely no difference without the generosity of your listening. I better get over myself right now, And it really changed my approach.
There's a beauty when that's reciprocal, though. Because from my side, there's gratitude, appreciation. You're a big deal to me, John. So, and I think that back and forth, just outside of a podcast episode, just generally in life, that's really where the magic happens. I think the back and forth where two people are serving, and this is true of a marriage, a friendship, whatever the back and forth is, the human condition is such that we were created to give and to serve. And I think that resonates with everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree. And listen, Mike, this is only political in the sense of being political for every single person in our country. I really think we need to get back to caring about and serving each other, no matter what we disagree on. I would love to see that.
If there's an opportunity to collaborate on that point, I would love to do so. And honestly, so I have several shorts that I've recorded that I actually haven't uploaded yet on civil discourse. It's something that Abraham Lincoln talked about at length as we were dealing with the Civil War. It's just the ability to have civil dialogue, despite the differences, but just be able to give the consideration and respect that I'm listening to you.
Oh, it's so important. Let's talk about it. Because I have a few ideas, and I have, So.
And honestly, John,
but
go ahead, John, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, it goes to your point of like, a life worth living is a life where we're serving each other, right?
Yeah.
And anybody that ever said anything brilliant about this, from Jesus to Buddha to whoever, they didn't say a life worth living is serving the people you agree with. In fact, they said something very different than that.
Yes, I totally agree. Yeah. And that's really where, if we're going to grow as a nation, that's what has to occur. And coming out of the Air Force as lieutenant colonel, we're supposed to be apolitical. I don't know how politics has somehow crept into the military, but we serve at the pleasure of the president. Like, we follow the orders of the president. And there's an element of like, how has politics become so divisive to where And John, you probably agree or believe things that I don't agree or believe with. We seem to have a lot in common and agree on a lot of different things. But the fact that as a human being, we're allowed to think a little bit different, and that Bob the Builder in here or Rob the Fixer or whatever my guy is doing something in here that's different than your guy. That's okay. Let's talk about that. Let's love each other. Let's serve each other. Let's meet somewhere in the middle to have that conversation. I think it's so important.
Yeah. I think somewhere along the line, we forgot that's the superpower of our country. It's not a problem. That's the superpower.
Yeah, 100%. Well, John, this has been way beyond what I expected the conversation to be, and I'm so incredibly grateful for your time. I do have one last segment that I'd like to go through where I'm going to read you a list. I've never done this before in the history of It Is Good, and this is my 6th episode.
Okay.
I'm going to read you a speaker. I'm going to say their name, and then I just want you to give me 1 or 2 words that respond to the first thing that comes to your mind. Sound fair?
Am I going to know these speakers?
100%. And if you don't, it's okay. If you don't, it's okay. We'll move on.
Okay.
Sound good?
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Sounds great.
Adolf Hitler.
Okay. The first word that comes to mind is passionate for the dark side.
Right. Yeah. But in terms of public speaking, and one of the things I noticed.
Guy was on fire. Like, people would pass out at his rallies. Now, it was interesting because electricity was still relatively new, and things like loudspeakers, they really hadn't had loudspeakers much before ever, right? So like there was this big technological change that he jumped on top of that really fueled his message and his impact that I don't think we talk about enough, right? But like, people would pass out. They would wet their pants and stuff at his rallies because he was such a dynamic speaker. And here's what I would say, if I'm allowed. The dark side knows how to use this stuff already. That's why I am so on fire to work with people who are on the light side of the force, because I don't think they even realize they have a lightsaber yet.
That's so good. And I'm a Star Wars geek, so to hear you say that, I'm like, yes, get a job.
Okay, cool, good.
Okay, Winston Churchill.
The first thing that comes to mind with Winston Churchill is just, oh my God, I love how he speaks. And the thing that's meaningful that comes to my mind that would make a difference is practice, dedication. That guy would practice for an hour for every minute that he was going to be addressing the nation or whatever, right? If he had a 30-minute talk he was going to give, he would practice it after he finished it and got it just how he wanted. He'd practice it for 30 hours. Do you know you would be pretty good too if you did that, right?
I've got a quick anecdote for the listeners. So I was at the Pentagon for 2 years. There's still an MFR, a memorandum that is disseminated for the staff there called Brevity. And it's by Winston Churchill that basically explains the need. It was a mandate from him to the entire government in England to say, you need to be intentional about being brief. And then there was kind of another addendum to that down the line that basically says, I apologize for my verbose language, but I didn't have the time to be brief.
Boom. Yeah. Yes. And dude, anybody that's a speaker will admit to you in a heartbeat that an hour-long talk they could do right now, but a really good 12-minute talk, that's going to take a while.
That's good. MLK Jr.
Ooh. Oh my God. Brings tears to my eyes. Like, the word that comes to my mind for him is a word that I really love around public speaking, because I tell people there's a reason you're scared of public speaking. Look what happened to Jesus, Joan of Arc, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Socrates, right? Get noticed by the group and, right? So that's why you're scared. If you're not scared, then either you've learned to disassociate because you've been in horrible situations, which is one thing, or you're a flat out sociopath, right? So anyone who gets up, who's a normal functioning human being and speaks in front of the group, it's never about fearless. Fearless gets you killed. It's about courage. That guy was so courageous. Can you imagine standing in the places where he spoke in front of those huge audiences outside, knowing that that there were lots of people who wanted you dead?
Yeah.
And one of them finally got you, right? Talk about courage. Just talk about a profile in courage and passion. And the other thing that I think's there for him is love. That guy loved.
Hmm.
I didn't realize that would make me so emotional.
No, that's beautiful,
Does
John.
that-
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You being present is such a gift that I receive. And I think that type of currency is so overlooked in life, especially in an age of distraction where,
Yeah.
everyone's got this stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
as human beings, like, we can be in this moment together. And
Yeah.
that's so sacred and special to just be present with somebody, regardless of what you're doing or where you are. It's just such a beautiful thing. So thank you for that gift. That is genuinely very special. Massive curveball, Donald Trump.
Okay. Like again, so on one hand, he's not a good speaker. The guy is not a good speaker, but he totally understands the stuff that I'm trying to teach to people on the light side of the force. In my opinion, he's not on the light side of the force. Sorry, it's just my opinion. But he is really, really good. So I say communicating with human beings is not logical. You may have noticed. It's not logical, it's biological. And when you understand the biology, you can make it logical again. But anybody who goes in thinking logic by itself should win will never be very effective with human beings. And I think he's got that emotional side down, and he's got a lot of the things that I teach. And like I said, we can talk about a lot of different things. I personally think that he's on the dark side of the force, but he's extremely good at wielding that lightsaber. And I think a lot of people underestimate him because he doesn't come across like a really great orator. But boy, is he good at pushing the buttons and understanding the non-logical emotional connection side of communication.
Would you go so far as to say good side, the light side, and the dark side is fear and love?
Oh, yeah. I would totally go with you on that. I think the opposite of fear or the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is fear. I totally think so. And I think that light side, I could say fear. And listen, Joe Biden is 100% on the love side, right? Like I'm not right, as a single individual, not with any comparisons here. I personally think Donald Trump is coming from fear and from separation, and that's where he gets his currency, and he's extremely good at doing it. And it's funny, and look, I know, don't get all over me for this, but there are certain similarities between Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump in how they were good at using that emotional aspect of communication, and their opponents freaking were clueless. They're like, what are you talking about? And it's like, yeah, you just cleaned your clock because you have no idea what's going on.
He's playing chess. You're playing checkers. Totally different level of
that for sure.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of sales folks, speakers, people that prey on that fear just to make a connection.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
would I be out of bounds to say that love has more power?
Oh, it's not in my ballpark. I would totally agree with you. And here's the thing I talk about, because I always have to address this up front with my trainings. I believe that what I am teaching people is influence. And influence in my book is when you use the techniques that that I teach and others teach, right? When you use these techniques and it's authentic and genuine, and it has everybody's best interests at heart. That's influence. And people don't mind being influenced. They enjoy being influenced when it's done well, right? Manipulation is those same tools, but inauthentically with the intention of taking advantage of people, not having everyone's best interests at heart.
Can you manipulate people with their best interest in heart to move them to an action that you know is good for them?
Well, I think that if I were to really tighten the screws and rigorously use the words, what you just said there would be influencing people.
Sure.
And I guess that maybe thinking about it a little more deeply with what you said, there may be some elements of fear and whatever, like, or worry or whatever. Like, look, I mean, there's nothing wrong with pointing out that there's a downside to this or whatever, right? Or if you don't do something this year, then you still won't have done something by next year. And, like, there's some element of that I think can be in influence as long as it's authentic and it's genuinely with everybody's best interests at heart. Setting people at each other's throats, yeah, I'm going to say that's more manipulation,
Well, speaking of love, Mr. Rogers.
Oh my gosh. Again, wild courage,
Yeah.
right? And just deep, deep, deep love. And the other thing that I would say about him is unrecognized brilliance, right? His ability to do what he did and to speak like he spoke and to sound so simple and dorky and plain spoken, and you can tease him for switching sweaters and stuff. But oh my gosh, was that guy brilliant at and I think what he had was going to make me cry again. Seeing the brilliance inside of people and speaking to that kind of no matter what was going on, right?
Yeah. Yep. With such sincerity. Like, there's a depth that people go in the delivery of words, because words are just words. But when there's something behind them, like, you can know what's going on in me. If you knew me super well, John, you'd be like, something's a little off with you. That's okay, because generally speaking, I'm in a very, very good place internally. But yeah, going through some stuff, sometimes that gets knocked off a little bit. People that, are like Mr. Rogers, that come from such a selfless, give it away, love, serve. And you spoke about this several times, but specifically in that large crowd, you feel the magnitude of the words. And I think there's a duality where the words have meaning, but there's also something behind the words that's almost pushing it and propelling it forward.
For sure.
Which is a great segue into our last individual.
Okay.
Tony Robbins.
Ooh, okay. So, this is so terrible. I'm going to play the game though, okay? Because you said the first words that come into your mind.
Please.
Like,
Okay, controversial, Joe.
The first word that comes into my mind is good, right? He's good. And the next word that comes into my mind is manipulator. Because I feel like his stuff is extremely, like, he's gotten so good at using the NLP and the stuff and the triggers and the whatever that I feel like he's lost a little bit of that initial just authenticity, right? And now this is me saying this from a very far view, because I haven't been to a Tony Robbins thing in forever. I haven't listened to his tapes. I haven't seen what he's been doing recently. I've heard he's been doing really great stuff. And I like Tony Robbins a lot. And I feel like there's a level of heart and soul that he could bring to what he's doing that could really deepen it. But he's so successful at what he's doing, it's hard to change what's working, right?
Do you feel that on people if they're hardened?
I mean, I think I do, you know. I think that I'm fairly perceptive about like where people are and their authenticity and what's, you know, stuff like that. I mean, I think it's actually part of why I'm good at what I do. If I'm just going to get rid of false modesty.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
pretty
Absolutely.
tied into people. you know.
And tying it back to a previous conversation, like, you know, I'm in the supermarket, I'm looking at the other 6'6" guy, 6'8" guy.
Yeah.
You know, you just know when you're with somebody that's, you know, just you
Yeah.
being so present during this podcast. And I'll just use it as a segue to say thank you for coming on the show, being here for more than an hour, but also being so present. Somebody with your schedule that flies all around the world and does so many things, to be here for this small little podcast with me for an hour, to be available to me, to the questions, to dialogue, is a gift that I do not take for granted, and I'm so appreciative of it.
But you are beyond welcome. And there's so much I'd like to say, and I would rather just leave it at that and just say you're so welcome, and it's an honor, and it means a lot to me to be here. So thank you too, and you're very welcome.
Well, for anyone that's looking to elevate their speaking game and perhaps dive a little bit deeper into what John and I have talked about the last hour, please be sure to check out John's book, Your Amazing Itty Bitty Guide to Being TED Worthy. And remember, it's not just about speaking, it's about connecting, inspiring, and creating a lasting impact. Everyone, have a good day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.